Welcome everyone to Rules Explained. We are going over X-Wing from Fantasy Flight Games. I am John Merritt.
I'm Rob Nothing.
In this episode, let's get started. In this episode, we're going over the fundamental concepts. In our last episode, we went over the component list of X-Wing. And this one, we're going to be going over the fundamental concepts of the game. The fundamental concepts are ships, the initiative value, and how to measure. It's very simple, but the instructions said we need to understand these fundamental concepts. The first fundamental concept we have is ships. This game is based on ships.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, each ship has a token, the actual ship itself. It has all the cards, all the upgrade cards, and it has a maneuver dial. Along with the ship, every is assigned a pilot. The pilot has an initiative value. The initiative value is very, very important. In fact, I've even highlighted numerous elements of the game refer to initiative, but its primary function is to determine the order in which ships act. So when we move into the actual playing of the game and we go in through the turn, the initiative values start at 1, and then in steps, in one increments, we go up to 10. So it's 1 through 10.
If I can go ahead and do a little backtrack here to ships, just real quickly, there's a little comment that I would like to make. I really wish, because I like the way you described it better than the way they describe it, because your ship is not just the card, the token, and plastic miniature base pegs, okay? It really is your upgrade cards. It really is your maneuver dial. All of that should be considered your ship. So that way they understand as you're reading this game and as you're trying to learn this game, that your ship has multiple, or each ship has multiple components attributed to it. So that way you don't get confused as far as what all these cards are for and what all these tokens and other items are for. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
Yep. So, and that's a good point. So the initiative determines when you move. It also determines when you fire, but more on that later. Ideally, just keep in mind that the initiative order is for when that ship acts. If two players have the same initiative value, so if they both have 5, the player with the first player marker then goes first. This is something they added in 2nd edition. In 1st edition, they said if 2 ships have the same initiative, the Empire goes first. I thought this was ridiculous.
Well, it made it difficult if you weren't playing Empire versus Rebels. I mean, what happened if you were playing Rebels versus, some sort of faction? Yeah, so that made
Rebels versus Rebels, yeah.
Right, exactly. What the heck? Let's have a little Civil War and a Civil War.
Empire versus Empire, right? Or Empire versus First Order, who knows?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I think the initiative marker is a very good upgrade from the original system.
So the first player marker, when you create your squad in tournament play, it's 200 points. So whomever has the lowest point value gets the advantage of being the first player marker. And there are some rules we'll also go over that dictate or in which this comes into play. So the first player marker, the person with the lowest points gets it. So if I have 200 points and Rob has 198 points, he becomes the first player. He gets the first player marker token. For measuring.
But the initiative is still going to flow in the order of the initiative cards on your individual ships. It's only going to come into play, if I'm getting this right, if there is a tied initiative value.
Correct. There's a few other things where it comes into play, but we'll touch on that later. Measuring. You get a really neat measuring stick. And let me switch over to the other screen. So the measuring stick is right here. And as you can see, it's divided into 3 sections. 1, 2, and 3, these are your different range values. To determine the range, you pick it up, put it down at the base of your ship, and lay it out on top of the ship that you want to fire at. Wherever the closest point of that ship meets, that's the range. So as you see, as this TIE fighter is trying to shoot this X-Wing, He's in between the 1 and the 2 range. He would then be classified as range 1. The other thing that's important to note is there is range 0. When 2 ships are touching, that's considered range 0. And there are some rules for that. Like, for example, you cannot shoot at a ship at range 0. You can't shoot another ship, but not the ship you're touching. I'm going to go back to our rule book here.
Now, is range 0, I think that's an actual clarification from the original rules. They did have the same rule, touching ships cannot shoot, but I think the designation of an actual range 0 seems to be new to second edition. Is that true?
I think it is, yeah. In first edition, I don't think there was technically a range of 0. It's just the ships were touching.
Right.
So this is something they kind of cleaned up, which is really nice, because there were some debates about this. Honestly, it was something I had completely missed. The other thing they did, and let me see, I think we're going to be talking about it later, was the movements and how, see, first edition, when you moved, and if there was an enemy ship in front of you and your template went over it, you actually stopped and got stuck at range 0. In second edition, you actually go past the ship. It's just if you end your turn on top of another ship, that's when you pull it back, and the two ships are actually touching. We'll explain that later. Let me see.
And that's probably the only thing that I've never truly understood from this game, which again, we'll talk more about later, but the idea that in the vastness of space, if my ships are right next to each other, they're locked out of being able to fire at each other. But that, again, we'll talk more about that later, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I don't know. And again, if it's beyond range 3, then it's just simply out of range. Setting up the game. So it looks like they have 6 different steps on how to set the game up. First thing you need to do is gather your forces. You get your tokens, you get your cards, you get your ships, you get your smaller tokens. And as you can see from here, they have shield tokens now. Again, one side is blue, one side is red. So as your ship takes hits, it gets taken off the shield value first. And when that happens, you just simply flip the token over to red to designate that it's been spent. So the first thing you do is you gather your forces. You assign IDs if you have ships which are the same. Like, for example, if you have multiple TIE fighters, they come with little plastic boards you put on the bases themselves. You know, 1, and then you put the 1 on the card so you know which one corresponds with. You determine the player order. Who goes first? The person with the first player token goes first. If they by using squad points, the player with the lowest squad points, you know, who's first player. Otherwise, you can just determine who it is. But I do this person who has the first player marker token. You establish the play area. Generally, this is a 3-foot by 3-foot square. There are many different Starfield maps. You can purchase many third-party ones. We just took a black cloth and threw it out there and just created boundaries and said, this is space.
I thought that was a very economical thing to do. I mean, yes. I'm not trying to go ahead and then try to disrespect any company, but some of those play mats are very expensive, and you know, just go buy yourself at Joann Fabrics a piece of felt for a few bucks and give yourself a pat in the back for saving some cash.
Absolutely. Placing obstacles. There are asteroids in space, satellites. In the test fight, you put down 6. 6 asteroids, I believe, 6 obstacles. And we'll talk about those. If the ships fly through it, you basically roll a damage die. They want you to place it 1 at a time. It says it looks like beyond, you know, range 2, so they want them spaced out on the board. You place your forces. You go from initiative order from the lowest to the highest. So whoever has the lowest initiative has to put out their ship, and then the following initiative value, whoever has 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they put their ships down accordingly. So everybody who has initiative value 1 places their ship, initiative value 2, they then place their ship, initiative value 3, they then place their ships.
From a tactical standpoint, that makes total sense because the lower initiative represents the craft and pilot who is inexperienced, or the craft that is which is lacking in maneuverability. So obviously, when those vessels enter the star field of battle, they're not going to have that opportunity to position themselves for the best tactical options. So when you have the higher initiative values, that makes sense because these pilots are more experienced, or the aircraft, or sorry, the starcraft are much more maneuverable. They will be able to put themselves into that best tactical option from the get-go of the battle. I like that a lot. I like the idea that makes a lot of sense.
Because the person with the higher initiative value can then see where everybody else is and put himself in an optimal spot.
Right.
And then prepare other components, shuffle the damage deck. Usually there's 2 damage decks, yours and your opponent's. If not, you just have the 1 and you split it. Get your dice and you are good to go. In the core game, it comes with 3 red and 3 green. And we talked about those a little bit. You can see from the video here. This is going to be a short episode tonight. So that's how to get the game set up. We understand the core pieces to it, the ship, the measuring. Rob, is there anything you wanted to add?
I think that covers it. And I want to go ahead and resist the temptation to start talking about the various cards. You mentioned damage cards and dice. I think we should just go ahead and do one step at a time, because unlike other games where it's pretty much spelled out for you in the rules, this game, everything's spelled out for you in the components. I don't know if that makes total sense to anyone just yet, but that's what makes it easier. It's harder to explain maybe at first, but once it gets into your mind as far as how this works, it becomes a very intuitive system, and it's a wonderful game to be able to play to simulate those great star battles of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, I mean, I really do love this game because the turn sequence, I believe, only has like 4 steps to it. So it's simplistic, but yet there's so much you can do within those 4 steps, strategically and tactically.
Yeah.
After I move, I get to perform an action. That's huge. Do I stay alert? Do I evade? Do I do a barrel roll? Do I, do something? Because all these ships can do different stuff. It's so cool.
And this is where that initiative comes into play, because some people might be wondering, well, what's the point of worrying about going last and first and so on and so forth? Well, if I go after my opponent, I can see what their action is going to be. If they're going to focus, maybe I want to evade. Yep. If I'm not thinking I'm in the best position, or maybe I want to go ahead and do a maneuver to go and get out of their firing arc after I see that they're putting all their effort into focusing. That's one of the really cool things about this game and the initiative system.
All right, guys, that's it for this show. Next week, we are going to start actually playing the game. We're going to dive into the rules. We'd like to thank Ethan Peebles for the music, did a fantastic job. Again, you can always find us on Spotify, iTunes. We're on YouTube at Rules Explained. You can email us at rulesexplained@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. That's all I got. Guys, thank you for listening.
Adios.